We actually now have to cross live to Marrakesh, Morocco, where the Africa Investment Forum is underway. Let's have a listen.
$1 billion for the development of infrastructure. Annually, the African Development Bank commits between $1.5 billion to $2 billion to regional infrastructure projects and mobilizes equal amounts or at times double the amounts in form of co-financing from our partners. The bank's support for regional integration focuses on catalyzing public and private investment in transport and electricity connections. Today, our active portfolio of regional integration projects stands at more than $13.5 billion. We are financing the development of regional electricity corridors to assure reliable and competitively priced electricity. The African Development Bank and partners are implementing the $20 billion Desert to Power initiative to develop 10 gigawatts of solar power across 11 countries in the Sahelian zone, including regional transmission lines. We also support the development and expansion of regional power pools in collaboration with the African Union, Commission, and of course the regional economic communities, and the heads of the institutions are here with us today. Now, driving our support for the development of regional transport corridors is the need to fast-track the integration of African economies, lower transport costs, connect landlocked countries to coastal countries, and improve regional trade and competitiveness. It is also to ensure that critical infrastructure, especially roads, ports, rail, connect countries to zones of major agricultural potential or where there exists abundant mineral resources or even oil and gas. As of 2022, the African Development Bank has financed 25 transport corridors, constructed over 18,000 kilometers of road, 27 border posts, and 16 bridges for a total amount of $13.5 billion US. Now, let me share with you some examples of these transformative regional corridors. The bank's investment in the Mozambique-Beira corridor transport system is helping to reduce transport costs of imports and exports for Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Now, it was a momentous occasion on the 10th of May of 2021 when the Kazumgula Bridge was officially commissioned by the presidents of Botswana and Zambia. This $259 million strategic bridge, financed by the African Development Bank, the Japanese International Development Agency, and the European Union Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, contributes to regional connectivity in the North-South Corridor and the integration of the Southern African Development Community. The $2.7 billion Nacala Rail and Port project in Mozambique connects Mozambique and Malawi, strengthening export competitiveness. It was financed by the African Development Bank, Japan Bank for International Cooperation, JBIC, the Musuo Bank, Nippon Export and Investment Insurance, and the Export Credit Insurance Corporation of South Africa. Another one which I'm excited about because I just came back also from seeing it again is the Senegambia Bridge, financed by the African Development Bank and the European Union, which now connects Gambia and Senegal, reducing travel time by over 50% and improving trade between both countries. The Lagos-Abidjan Highway Corridor, which connects Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire, secured investment interests of $15.2 billion at the Africa Investment Forum last year from multiple financiers and investors. It will change everything within that particular region. Of course, I am absolutely delighted that last month the African Development Bank and the Africa Finance Corporation, one of the supporters of the African Investment Forum, joined with the United States, the European Union, together with the governments of Angola, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo to develop the strategic Lobito Corridor. This strategic corridor will connect Angola, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, opening linkages to the mines and connecting them to the port in Angola. The African Development Bank will commit $500 million to this $1.6 billion investment opportunity. The Lobito Corridor also brings together the power of two incredibly powerful global initiatives. The one led by President Biden of the United States, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure, and of course, an investment, PGII, and the European Union's Global Gateway. Clearly, friends of Africa, much progress is being made on the development of regional corridors. But there exist several more corridors to be developed in our quest for full regional integration. To fully optimize the benefits of the development of regional corridors across Africa, I think we should focus on 5 priority areas. First, dedicate pool financing facilities to support the preparation and development of corridor projects. Second, special industrial zones should be developed around the corridors to, of course, optimize on existing infrastructure in these corridors. It costs a lot of money to make infrastructure, to build infrastructure. Once you have it, you've got to be able to optimize around it to take advantage of the costs, high costs that have gone into that. Third, I think we need to put in place a systematic approach and, of course, a platform to identify and syndicate around the development of strategic regional corridors. And to achieve this, the Africa Investment Forum will now, from now, dedicate a special boardroom annually for regional corridors. These will foster greater collaboration, co-financing, and faster development of these strategic corridors in Africa. Fourth, development of regional corridors should be complemented with the establishment of one-stop border posts for trade facilitation and the reduction of travel times on these corridors. And fifth, concessional financing, such as provided by the African Development Fund, offers low-income countries unmatched resources to commit to the development of these regional corridors. The leveraging effect alone provided by the African Development Fund regional envelope is simply amazing, particularly for low-income countries like Magic. You put in money and you get several times in return, and I'll explain it in a second. So take, for example, the African Development Fund approved the Central African Republic and Congo-Brazzaville multimodal transport corridor development project. And the senior minister from the government of Congo-Brazzaville is here with us, Minister Jack. A critical section of the Pointe-Noire, Brazzaville, Bangui, N'Djamena multimodal transport corridor. Now, to secure the $275 million to develop this corridor, all that the Central African Republic had to do was put down only $4 million. Of course, the balance of that was provided by the African Development Fund's regional financing envelope, which gives you a multiplier effect of about 70 times. So whenever we want to develop any corridors at all, and we have countries that are part of the African Development Fund, as long as those 2 countries or 3 countries agree on the corridor, whatever the amount, of course we have a limit of how much we can have as African Development Fund. Within that envelope, once you've committed no more than maybe 10% of your resources to it, both countries, the African Development Fund would pay for the full rest of it. It's almost like putting your money in and you get several times over. That's the way it works, and I think that we should use this a lot in spurring the development of corridors all across Africa very well, so also that low-income countries are not left out. It's not just the big countries, but the low-income countries are not left out. And that is the kind of Africa that we want, a fully connected, interconnected Africa, using regional corridor infrastructure and innovative regional financing instruments to unleash economic opportunities and assure competitiveness of national and regional value chains. A well-connected Africa will be a more competitive Africa. Regional corridors are the gateways to wealth for Africa. Let's build more of them. Let's make Africa wealthy, because we will not be known as a museum of poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adesina, for that. Absolutely, a well-connected Africa is possible. And of course, regional corridors can help us achieve that. A round of applause once again for Dr. Adesina. Now, moving things on quickly, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Dinai Pauly. She's the Senior Advisor, Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment at the U.S. Department of State, for a keynote speech on the strategic vision of the U.S. on behalf of the PGII in the development of transformative corridors with particular focus on the Lobito corridor. Round of applause for her, please.
I like the walk-up music. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here at my first AIF, and I'm excited to spend a few minutes talking to you about the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, what we've accomplished to date, and where we're going. We've talked a lot about the challenge, and globally there's a massive infrastructure gap to the tune of $40 trillion. And as President Adesina mentioned, over $70 billion a year just for the continent of Africa. This means gaps in services to citizens and economic bottlenecks for markets and emerging markets, for markets around the world. Growing up as the daughter of a single mom in America, I understood from an early age that while access to opportunity, while talent is spread equally, access to opportunity is not. And my mom stretched to afford an apartment in a town where they had good schools because she understood that access to the building blocks, to the infrastructure of education, is key to success. Closing Africa's infrastructure gap is critical to leveling the global playing field and ensuring that the infrastructure is laid for the next generation of Africa's youth to be successful. As part of the answer, in 2022, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment was announced at the G7 Leaders Forum, focused on mobilizing $600 billion to meet the infrastructure needs of low and middle-income countries around the world. Through PGI, the US government aims to offer a credible alternative, unlocking public and private capital to build durable, quality infrastructure that raises labor and environmental standards and advances gender equality. Ultimately, we want to create jobs, strengthen supply chains, and advance inclusive economic growth. We focus in a number of areas: climate and green energy supply chains, digital connectivity, health and health security, agriculture and food security, and the transport infrastructure that connects and enables these investments, all with a gender equality lens. Recently, we adopted the corridor approach, focusing where we believe layering these investments across each other can make more catalytic and transformative impact in strategic corridors around the world. Our first and flagship economic corridor begins in the port of Lobito in Angola, aiming to build a transformative a transformative economic link connecting the continent from the Atlantic to the Indian Oceans. Revitalizing the Libido Corridor, connecting Angola, DRC, and Zambia to each other and to global markets, reflects the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to partnering with African nations and institutions and not relying just on traditional aid for Africa. Our goal is not rail for the sake of rail, but to catalyze investments across multiple sectors to spur economic growth and improve lives. The first phase of the Libido Corridor development is indicative of the PGI private sector-led investment approach across multiple sectors. We've mobilized over $1 billion to date of US government funding in Angola, and we're not done. That includes a $250 million investment from our Development Finance Corporation to the Libido Atlantic Corridor that is refurbishing and upgrading the rail line from the port to the DRC border. It includes a $900 million EXIM package to launch a 500 megawatt solar project that will support the grid. Recently, the USAID announced a $5 million grant for AfriCell to launch mobile money for the first time in Angola, creating an on-ramp for women and the unbanked to participate in the digital economy. This is the example of the PGI model at work that we want to replicate as we expand this corridor into Zambia. Our work on phase 2 began when the 3 Libido Corridor countries came together with the Southern Africa Development Community to sign the Libido Corridor Transit Transport Facilitation Agency Agreement in January. We were excited in May when President Biden announced the US's support to develop the corridor, and in August, the EU joined us in partnership. Just 2 weeks ago, we signed the MOU, you saw the picture a bit earlier, where we have 7 sides coming together, and we were excited to announce the African Development Bank and AFC as key funding partners, with AFC as the lead project developer for an 800-kilometer railway to connect northwestern Zambia to the eastern Congo in the existing rail line there. We've raised $10 million already for the first phase of feasibility for the rail line, which we intend to launch by the end of the year, and collectively identified close to $1 billion for funding at different stages of the rail and across multiple sectors in the corridor. We intend to break ground by 2026 and be operational by 2028. This accelerated milestone supports Angola's vision to diversify its economy through agricultural investment and through the enhancement of its key ports. It supports Zambia's vision as a land-linked nation to connect to regional markets and global markets and enhance its critical minerals and agricultural sectors. And it supports DRC's vision and the collective vision of all 3 countries to enhance trade, as they've stated, through the Libido Corridor Transit Transport Facilitation Agency Agreement. This new Zambia-Libido rail line will reduce land transport by an estimated 12 days, facilitating even further investment in agribusiness, in logistics and processing for critical minerals and agricultural goods, laying fiber, and connecting rural communities with green power. It will also represent the largest US-led infrastructure investment on the continent in over a generation, and we are proud to do so in lockstep, side by side with our African partners. With our work on this historic Libido economic corridor, PGI is demonstrating that by designing investments for and by the private sector, starting from day one, by de-risking with support from regional and G7 partners, we can make commercial arrangements for large critical infrastructure projects that minimize debt burdens for their host countries. My presence today at this podium is proof that investing in infrastructure, whether that's the critical blocks of education or the connecting rail links, makes all of the difference. I look forward to hearing from our panelists with lessons learned, and I hope to see many of you in the audience investing alongside us in the Libido Corridor in the years to come. Thank you.
Well, that was Ms. Dinai Pauly, Senior Advisor, Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment at the U.S. Department of State. Now, we're going to move on to our panel discussion now, where we'll take a deep dive on regional corridors. We'll be hearing from the governments of Burundi, Angola, the East African community. We'll also be hearing from development partners and the private sector. So please welcome to the stage with me His Excellency Dieudonné Dukundane, Minister of Infrastructure, Burundi. A round of applause, please. May I also please call on His Excellency Ivan Santos, Secretary of State for the Economy, Angola. Please welcome to the stage with me His Excellency Peter Matuki, Secretary General, East African Community. A round of applause, please. Also, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Mohamed Kada, Assistant Secretary General, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA. Please also welcome to the stage His Excellency Sediko Duka, Commissioner for Infrastructure, Energy and Digitization, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. A round of applause, please. Also, please welcome with me to the stage Mr. Sergio Oliete, Head of Unit, Sustainable Transport and Urban Development at the European Commission. A round of applause, please. Please also give a warm welcome to Mr. Mehdi Tazirifi, CEO, Tanger Med Special Agency, Morocco. Always important to have the private sector representation. Also, please welcome to the stage with me Mr. Philippe Labonne. He's the CEO, AGL Group. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and patience so far. And of course, a very warm welcome to our panelists today. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, we'll be taking a deep dive into regional corridors. We'll be looking at their strategic importance, like Dr. Adeshina mentioned earlier, in connecting Africa. I know that there's some transformational ongoing projects that are going on at the moment, and so we'd like to just get a feel, just a sense of how much progress is being made and how it is these projects or the potential of these projects to transform Africa in the context of connectivity. I'll start with Mr. Dieudonné Dukundane, Minister of Infrastructure. Honorable Minister, Burundi plays a key role in the central corridor under which you are developing a 900-kilometer electrified standard gauge railway transport system between Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the port of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Now, considering Burundi's strategic position in the Central Corridor, could you tell us the strategic importance and economic benefits of this SGR project, particularly in the context of the trade enhancement under the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Yeah, thank you very much, dear moderator, and allow me first of all to sincerely commend the initiators of this forum, the Africa Investment Forum. This platform is unique in the sense that it's not only a venue for people to come and participate, speak and go, but it allows people really to make deals and transact. So on this, I think my country, the Republic of Burundi, should join her voice to commend the African Development Bank, President Adesina, his team, the co-founders, for this initiative. Secondly, we benefited as a country, as a region, the Central Corridor region. These are 5 member states, Tanzania, Burundi, DRC, Rwanda, and Uganda. We already secured last year through the previous forum funding to develop our railway project that links Tanzania to Burundi. And the deal reached nearly $700 million US. And since then, last year, we embarked on procurement. And as we are talking now, we reached the stage of shortlisting contractors to build this railway line. I think this is a major step towards implementing this project. But also, as President Adesina was highlighting just a while ago, it's not a matter of building a railway or a road, it's a matter of making an impact. And our railway project, linking Burundi and Tanzania in the DRC, is a major route towards huge mineral deposits that exist in our region, in Burundi, DRC, and Tanzania. And also on this angle, we have made progress in terms of securing the future company that will extract these minerals. So we believe that in the next few months, maybe early next year, 2024, we will be talking of another story where the concrete activities on the ground would have happened. Now, lastly, to come back to your question, why should we be proud of talking of this SGR? Why shouldn't we do business as usual, build roads? In the last 5-6 decades, we've been investing in roads. But this time around, we came to realize that failing to invest in the standard gauge railway has been costly to our economy. Take some figures. We are a country that is located at 1,500 kilometers away from the seaport of Dar es Salaam. When you undertake a return trip, this makes 300 kilometers. And relying on roads means that you only carry 25 or 28 tons over a distance of 3,000 kilometers. But when you do the comparison with a railway in place, it will help us to save nearly $100 per ton. And if you are running a business of nearly 1 million tons per year, you understand that we will be saving not less than $70 million US only by using railway. In other words, if we don't do so, we'll be losing the same amount. So in the next 10 years, actually, we would have lost nearly $1 billion, and this is exactly the amount that is needed to build a railway. So it's high time, and I believe the audience should agree with us that Africa has no choice. If we are to go continental, if we are to really embark on the free trade continental area with its benefits across the continent, there is no other alternative. Actually, if we don't do so, Africa will continue to depend on the rest of the world in terms of international trade, because so far it makes it easier or less costly to transact with China or America, while the intra-African trade is still at very low levels. So we really believe that this experience, among other that we've been hearing in the platform, will transform Africa, and our country is committed. Allow me, before I conclude, to just inform the audience that this central corridor, actually, that connects the port of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania to the other 4 countries under the coordination of the Central Corridor Transit Transport Facilitation Agency, actually, the initiative started way back in 2010. And over the last 15 years, an initiative led by the African Development Bank has helped the 5 countries to reach a level whereby we have got border posts, and now the African Development Bank is coming on board again, committing nearly $1 billion US, $0.5 billion US, to help the same countries to advance their agenda. So I think I may stop by there by again emphasizing on the need of railway if we are to transform the African continental trade objectives. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Your Excellency Dukundane, and we appreciate, of course, the commitment and just being resolute in ensuring that these projects are constructed, even though financing continues to be a constraint. Let's move on to Angola. Your Excellency Ivan Santos, Angola plays a central role in the Lobito corridor, hosting the port of Lobito, which is integral to the connectivity and functionality of this region artery, if you will. Now, one of the objectives of the regional transboundary corridors is to catalyze investments in domestic production and to revive, very importantly now, the private sector. Could you describe the plans of the government of Angola to invest in agriculture and agribusiness along the Lobito corridor and how it intends to leverage the logistics infrastructure to increase exports of agricultural commodities? Very important.
Thank you, yes, for your question. Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me, as I said, before I respond to your question, to do an overview about our highway. The highway was built in the early of 19th and was used to transport the copper from Zambia copper belt to the coast. Wherever the highway fell into disrepair during the civil war back in Angola. After rehabilitation work, the corridor was open again, and an agreement between three countries, Angola, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, providing more effective and efficient route between the three countries, both by sea and by land. But to operate this corridor, we have a consortium from three companies. One is Transfigura from Switzerland, the second one is Motengil from Portugal, and the last one is Venturis from Belgium. The partnership is also expected to create more jobs and regional integration. Just to tell you, for example, we in SADC are about almost 500 million people. It's important to integrate all the countries here in Africa. Well, to ensure the success of the Lobito corridor, Angola has implemented a set of reforms and measures. For example, we are investing a lot in capital assets, speaking on the budget side, and public-private partnership, and facilitating foreign investment. For example, improving our handle at the port of Lobito, CSI, with around 7 specialized terminals, improving our Benguela highways, international airport around the corridor of Lobito, and mainly 3 principles, main roads around the corridor of Lobito, national roads, trying to revamp, to improve our connectivity around the corridor of Lobito. We are improving our policies that promote partnership between states and private players in order to ensure more sustainable and effective business. Signature of agreement between Angola and the European Union and the Global Gateway Program, I think was in the last October. An agreement as well evaluating $300 million USD between Angola and World Bank to maximize the potential of Lobito corridor, a project called Diversifica Mais in Portuguese, which we abbreviate as D+, to accelerate the process of economic diversification back in Angola, job creation, through micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise in non-oil sectors, for sure, and mainly leading by humans, trying to bring more gender equality is the main focus. But in the agribusiness side, and to pursue our food security, and in line as well with Dakar 2, the government approved three big plans. One is the Plan Agrão, which is the plan for grain, cereals. The second one is the Plan Pecuária to produce more livestock, animal protein, because, for example, back in Angola, we import a lot of livestock, around 500 million by year, just in livestock. And the last one is Plana Pesca, which is for fishing, trying to produce more fishing. Regarding to Plan Agrão, which is more agro, the Plan Agrão is going to benefit a lot for Corridor of Lobito, because it can become the main route to transport and export the grains, the cereals, and making the life easier for investor and exporter. And business-wise, is more profitable to be around Corridor of Lobito. But for any companies can be part of that, can participate on Lobito Highway project in many ways, as construction, provide a service to Benguela Highways project, hauling stock, providing locomotive, wagons, for Benguela Highway project, telecom systems, bring the latest technology around the corridor of Lobito for small and medium-sized enterprise, finance service as well for medium, all companies around the corridor of Lobito, and the most important, invest in agro-business, because the corridor of Lobito is going to provide a lot of opportunities to transport and to export the product for agro-business. We are promoting Planaground, which is the cereals trying to pursue our food security. All value chains of Planaground and upstream, medium stream, and downstream. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Before we move on, just a quick note. After this conversation, which will last about 40 minutes, we will have 10 minutes to go into a Q&A, a session where audience will have the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists today. So let's move things on quickly. Your Excellency, Dr. Peter Matuki, let's take a view from a perspective from the East African community. The EAC has been at the forefront of regional integration initiatives, demonstrating a commitment to developing regional economic corridors. So here's my question. Could you elaborate on the primary drivers of success that the EAC has identified and leveraged on in spearheading the development of regional economic corridors? That's one. And also, what lessons could be shared with other regional economic communities to facilitate, very important now, continent-wide success?
Thank you very much. Let me start by appreciating the invitation by the African Development Bank, but also for organizing this very important forum. But also thank the government of Morocco for the warm reception accorded to us since we arrived here in Marrakesh. Our East African community is one of the building blocks of the African Union and very fast growing, expanding. Currently, now with 7 partner states, we have DRC as the latest member of the East African community. We have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Burundi, Republic, and Rwanda, and Uganda. And this is 7. That is a market of around 300 million people. And in this November, we are likely to admit Somalia into the community. And that means now the coastline of the East African community now goes to almost 5,000 kilometers stretching. And that will be important for us. But looking at the community itself is people-centered. Everything we do is demand-driven by the people and is private sector-led. Private sector-led, meaning that we believe regional integration succeeds if we, our private sector, as the engine of regional integration. And looking at the 4 pillars of our regional integration, the customs union, which is the first pillar, and that is about movement of goods within the partner states of East Africa, and the facilities that we put together to facilitate trade. That has really improved for the last 10 years, the intra-trade within East Africa. Now currently we started almost, it was below 10, now we're almost somewhere 20% intra-trade within East Africa. In fact, last year alone, 2022, within the East African region, we traded close to about $10 billion US, thanks to the initiatives by put in place to facilitate trade. But the second pillar, which is about the common market, movement of people, which again facilitates movement, and this gain is driven by the fact that people would want to do business, people would want to move. We have made it possible that when you are moving from one country to another, you don't need to use a passport, you use your national ID, and that becomes easy for people. Moving from Kenya to Uganda, for example, or Kenya to Rwanda, you just need to use your national ID. The third pillar, which is monetary union, is the demand by the capital, by the business, the private sector saying, within the doing business and to ease of doing business within the region, it's important that we have a currency that facilitates that. And now we are in the process of identifying a common currency within the East Africa that would be able to support this process. And then the ultimate pillar, which would be the political confederation. But I would want to say that the East African community, with that, and we look forward to even more expansion, we are looking at Ethiopia that has shown interest in joining Djibouti. So at the end of the day, we are looking at a market of close to about 700 million people coming from the entire Horn of Africa. 700 million people, that is almost half of Africa's population. now the East African community, right from the coastline of Indian Ocean to the Atlantic, and that is the East African community. And therefore, it is inevitable that infrastructure is so critical now to connect these countries and the businesses if we want really to move. And that is why, from where we sit as East African community, it is necessary and also very urgent that we push the infrastructure agenda.
Right.
And I want to thank African Development Bank for that kind of support and drive that they have. But most importantly is the fact that we have a strong private sector within East Africa that is actually pushing the agenda and saying that we want to do business. And the people themselves want to move from one country to another. And those are some of the things that are motivating our integration as East African community. But also trying to say that if we want to take full advantage of the African Free Trade Area, can we organize ourselves first as a regional economic bloc, as East African community, so that together we could be able even to support and leverage countries that may not be economically strong as others, and we approach the African Continental Trade Area as a regional economic bloc, right. And that is what we are trying to do. In terms of infrastructure and what we think all these things cannot be done without the infrastructure projects.
Right.
The central corridor that the southern corridor that my brother is speaking about, the president of Tanzania spoke about it yesterday, and the northern corridor, that runs from Mombasa and all the way to Uganda and ultimately to Rwanda. And then the central corridor that runs from Dar es Salaam all the way to Uganda. And the southern one that runs from Dar es Salaam, Burundi, and ultimately to DRC. These are the things that we feel that we need to focus on so that we can increase intra-EAC trade. And that is basically where we are feeling as East African community. The deal is, let us invest in infrastructure. We may be late, but better late than never.
You are absolutely right about that, Dr. Matsuki. A round of applause for him, please. Thank you so much for that. Let's move on quickly now. Ambassador Dr. Mohamed Kader, Assistant Secretary General at COMESA, this is my question to you. Could you please share your insights on how regional corridor projects align with COMESA's strategic objectives and how they can contribute to the broader goal of enhancing the intra-regional trade and economic integration?
Thank you very much. Well, first, allow me to refer to our medium-term strategic plan. We have a medium-term strategic plan that runs for 5 years. The one we have currently is from 2021 to 2025. It has 4 substantive strategic pillars: market integration, productive integration, physical connectivity, infrastructure, and lastly, gender and social affairs. Infrastructure and regional corridors are of great importance in COMESA, in Africa in general. Some of the examples that have already been given are sourcing imports from countries as far as China, India, or Brazil, because it's in fact less expensive than sourcing them from within the continent. This is why we give regional corridors high priority in COMESA. They fall under 2 of our 4 substantive strategic pillars, the one on physical infrastructure and connectivity, and the one on market integration. In case of the ADB, the African Development Bank, we know about the high fives of the bank, and of course, regional corridors here relate closely to the high five on integrating Africa. In COMESA, we have 21 member states, almost half of the African continent. It's the biggest functional regional economic community in the continent. But we have 9 landlocked countries out of the 21 countries. This is why developing regional corridors is of great importance in COMESA. But those corridors involve a lot more than just infrastructure. They involve trade facilitation, transport facilitation, institutional cooperation, international cooperation, and so on. At least from the perspective of COMESA, this is the case. When it comes to transport itself, infrastructure, the focus is on railway, road, and maritime transport. And in this case, under this factor, this element, we need to always ensure interoperability as a bare minimum. Otherwise, we cannot have a regional corridor. When it comes to transport facilitation, we have developed a long experience with transport facilitation in COMESA, providing instruments, very practical instruments like a regional carrier license, third-party insurance scheme, and so on and so forth, a lot of instruments for transport facilitation. Also trade facilitation, which is in fact a lot more important in Africa than tariff liberalization. And in trade facilitation, we also have developed a lot of instruments. To give you one example, we have the so-called Regional Customs Transit Guarantee Scheme, which is a unique scheme in the continent, and now working very closely with the African Continental Free Trade Area to upscale it. Corridors are usually linked, as we know, to seaports, specific seaports, because they have a lot to do with landlocked countries, transforming them to land-linked countries instead of landlocked ones. Over 85% of traffic in regional corridors in COMESA and in Africa in general now is by road. And roads are very expensive. They are exposed to a lot of damage, and this is why our focus should be a shift to railways, which is the most affordable, economic, and safe mode of transport. COMESA, as a member of Tripartite Free Trade Area, has several corridors running in or through the Iraq itself, including the North-South Corridor, the Central Corridor, the Northern Corridor. We have also developed several other corridors, bilateral ones, linking our member states. Other potential corridors that we are now looking at in COMESA in also cooperation with financial institutions like the African Development Bank is linking Lake Victoria with the Mediterranean Sea, is Lake Tanganyika Transport Corridor, and linking our island member states to the mainland continent, Africa, mainland. Now allow me to make three very short messages at the end. One, regional corridors are essential for trade and regional integration in the continent. There is no doubt about this. The corridors are not only about transport, they are about a lot more than transport, about transport facilitation, trade facilitation, and human mobility as well. Regional corridors should not be merely about transporting raw materials out of the continent. They should be used as platforms to build value chains. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohamed Kader, for that very insightful. Let's move on quickly. Let's get a perspective from the West African region. Your Excellency, Mr. Sediko Duka, given the strategic importance of the Abidjan-Lagos Corridor Highway in enhancing regional integration, trade, and economic growth across multiple sectors in West Africa, and considering ECOWAS's critical role in fostering regional integration in West Africa. Now, this is my question. How does ECOWAS envision its role and contribution in ensuring the successful implementation and operation of the Abidjan-Lagos Corridor Highway?
Okay, thank you very much. So this project, Abidjan-Lagos Corridor, involves 5 countries, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. It represents 1,028 kilometers, and also it represents 75% of trade volume in West Africa. It passes over major economic hubs like Abidjan, Accra, Tema in Ghana, Lomé, Cotonou, and Lagos in Nigeria. And it has also a supranational status. Now, the role of ECOWAS, as you said, ECOWAS has been given the mandate to prepare and implement the project through the treaty that these countries signed in collaboration with the 5 corridor member countries. So we have preparatory activities, but before, the project itself has institutional and legal framework. There is a treaty signed by the head of state and government, ratified by all the countries. There is also an intergovernmental agreement. There is an international project agreement, as well as what we call Abidjan-Lagos Corridor Management Authority, signed by the 5 ministers in charge of works and infrastructure. To this end, we set up governance and implementation body. We have, for example, a ministerial steering committee, an expert meeting that we held 3 to 4 times a year. And all the project implementation entities housed at ECOWAS and within each member country. We have also the role to mobilize resources. To this end, we mobilize $43 million to prepare that project, coming where 60% from African Development Bank, 33% from European Union, and the 8 share between ECOWAS Commission and the member countries. So we carry out studies, feasibility studies. They are already completed. Almost the detailed engineering studies are completed also. And through these studies, the IRR is between 11 to 15% for a total cost of the project between 12 and 15 billion. We have another component study on trade and transport facilitation, and another component on special development initiative. So we identify some projects because, like what the Commissioner said, in fact, this project is not just about having a simple highway for movement or traffic of persons and goods, but also it's an economic corridor. Also, it's a coordinated set of multi-modal transport, logistic, and infrastructure services. So we target some projects around this corridor, like on a refinery, on a free zone, industrial zone, on extension of ports, on power station, on mining. Now the execution and funding. So the studies are not completed, but they will be completed by the end of this year. So there is several financing schemes to consider, first through BOT, without government participation, and without any guarantee coming from the member countries. This is an option. The other option can be BOT with countries' participation. And the other option can be countries only, and selection of a private structure or private company to operate and manage the infrastructure implemented. So all this depending on naturally on the profitability of the section along the corridor. Some example, for example, exist that in power system that we create a special purpose vehicle, and or what we call, it's in French, Société de Patrimoine. I don't know in English, is it asset companies, but in French we said Société de Patrimoine. So I think this is what the study would determine what is the mode of funding of such project. I was talking about the Abidjan-Lagos Corridor Management Authority. We set up it's created, it has its rules and procedure. We establish a board of directors. We know already by now the members of this board of directors. And also we will take this project as a sample, because we have another one from Praia, Cape Verde, to Dakar, Senegal, and Abidjan. So all the lessons that we learn through this project, we'll take it for the other part, Praia, Dakar, Abidjan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Duka. Very insightful and very encouraging to hear about all those ongoing projects. And obviously, let's get a perspective from the development partner, in this case, the EU. Calling on Mr. Seyu Oliete. Now, the European Union is a key partner in supporting development of regional corridors in Africa. So this is my question. What innovative approaches is the Global Gateway considering to expedite the development of regional corridors and to overcome potential bottlenecks in implementation? One, also, how does the European Union plan to contribute contribute to financing these large-scale projects?
Thank you, Esther. And let me first thank you, the African Development Bank, for having invited us to the Africa Investment Forum. As President Adesina has highlighted in his speech, the collaboration between the European Union and the African Development Bank in supporting the African Union, the regional economic communities, and the countries in developing countries is very strong. And in many of the projects that have been mentioned today, there is a funding from the European Union, a funding in the form of grants. The European Union, we have the loans branch, which is the European Investment Bank. I'm representing the European Commission, who is the largest donor in the form of grants to supporting the transport sector in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular. And historically, we have been financing many infrastructure projects. And in absolute terms, in the last years, we have even increasing the funding we have been providing for filling these gaps, making infrastructure projects bankable, and blending these grants with the loans provided by the African Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, etc. But even if in absolute terms we have increased a lot of our funding, in relative terms we have realized that our impact was being reduced. And this is normal because Africa is developing, there is more and more trade, there is more and more mobility, there is a demographic increase. So the needs for the demand for mobility is higher. So we realized that we could not continue to work as we were doing before. We needed to have a different approach, and that's the approach that we adopted with this Europe-Africa strategic corridors, which is an approach that was agreed upon the African Union and the European Union at the at the summit in February 2022. So we selected 11 corridors. Now we have 12 corridors because we have added the Lobito corridor. And basically, there are two main drivers for this selection of why we did that. As I have said, in relative terms, we realized that our impact was lower and that we needed to concentrate the investments in a limited number of corridors to have a greatest impact. Instead of having roads everywhere around Africa, it was more efficient to concentrate all investments in just a limited number of corridors. The second main driver for this new approach is that this increase in the demand for transport in Africa should not necessarily imply higher greenhouse emissions and higher risk for biodiversity and higher social negative impacts. So we believe that the increase in transport in Africa could leapfrog to greening technologies. Railways have been mentioned here. So it's an opportunity for Africa to develop transport systems much more sustainable. And we believe the corridor approach is a good approach for that. So we choose, so for selecting these corridors, what we did is that we conducted a study with our joint research center. And because what was clear for us, we wanted to support the priority corridors in Africa, but as I have just said, we couldn't support everywhere. We selected this limited number of corridors where it was also a benefit for the European Union, of course. So we have chosen the corridors that are a priority for Africa, but also have the most, for example, tried exchanges with Europe, where we see that there is more contribution to human development, to security, to protection of the biodiversity. That's why we came to how we came to this now 12 corridors. But even like this, the corridors are very long, and we cannot support all the corridors. So even within the corridors, we are also trying to prioritize. And then we have two main criteria for this prioritization for the selection of where our grants, we would like our grants to be supporting specific projects. One is the additionality of our grant in terms of contribution to climate change mitigation and adaptation and protection of the biodiversity. So our grants are good for projects where we see clearly this additionality, and railway or waterways projects are very good projects for us. For example, urban mobility projects in the city centers that are along the corridors are very good projects for us. The second criteria for selecting projects along the corridors is, and I will stop here, is the support to value change. And of course, we want to select corridors where there is this linkage between value change and with value change. And for example, is for us a very clear linkage is the automotive industry and critical raw materials to develop, for example, batteries and automotive industry in the countries along these corridors. So this is basically the new approach of the Global Gateway, right, and how Europe intends to be more efficient in supporting Africa in developing its corridor. Thank you.
Mr. Sergio, thank you so much for that. Let's move on quickly now. And I'm always happy when I see the private sector represented here on panels, because we cannot have development on the African continent without that firm handshake, especially between the government and the private sector. So I'll come to you, Mr. Mehdi Arifi. Let's talk about your perspective now. Now, Med Group could play a critical role in developing regional corridors in Africa by focusing on infrastructure development, logistics, trade facilitation, and fostering economic integration. Now, this is my question for you. What do you think are the key roles for Tanger Med Group to contribute to the development of robust and integrated regional corridors in Africa, fostering economic growth and collaboration across borders? And if you can, please, also very important, please provide examples where Tanger Med has done so in Morocco.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for having me. We're actually public, but we're a public agency, but I'm very happy to share our experience. Obviously, I just want to start by extending our gratitude for the invitation today and for the platform to speak about what we're doing and how we contribute. I will start my remark with, in this very same room yesterday, President Adesina said that he was speaking about electric vehicles, and he said that the future depended on Africa. I just want to add to that sentence by saying it will also depend on efficient logistics. And I take this as a remark just to also thank the African Development Bank for setting up a specific panel to speak about corridors. It is of the essence. It was said a bit earlier about if we have to kind of set the picture of the African logistics maps, 2 or 3 figures. Trade over GDP peaks at 75%. Contribution of Africa in global import-export is below 5%. We spoke about, it was mentioned a bit earlier, the intra-African connectivity is below 20%. And while there's a great deal of infrastructure investment, in his opening remarks, he mentioned 44 billion invested into infrastructure. I'll just mention more specifically the figure for ports. That's 50 billion that was invested between 2007 and 2017. So it means that basically it's not only about the investment infrastructure that you need. You need the organization and the alignment of players to deliver logistics competitiveness and ensuring that that piece of infrastructure does impact positively in terms of spillovers. And the corridor approach is obviously a bright idea. And I once again thank you for organizing this. I think if I were to speak very quickly about our experience, we are Tanger Med with Marsa Maroc is a developer of logistics, port, and industrial platforms. We are present in 24 terminals, roughly 140 million tons, and in the backyard of the port, and this is our corridor. Basically, we run 3,000 hectares of industrial special economic zones. And there, if I were to speak about our contribution, I will look at it from 2 angles. The first one is, for Africa to develop, it needs efficient logistics through connectivity. President Adesina mentioned it a bit earlier. And for that connectivity and for African contribution to grow, we need obviously, Africa to be connected to the rest of the world while it's intra-connected. They go together. And there, we fully play our role as a main hub. We are obviously the leading port in the Med as well as in Africa. We are connected to 40 ports on a weekly, 40 African ports on a weekly basis, out of a total of 180 ports worldwide. So we fully play our role in making sure that Africa gets connected to the rest of the world. For our direct contribution to Morocco, in our own corridor, because we run our own corridor, it spans over roughly 50 kilometers. We have, it was mentioned, I'll just say specifically, it was mentioned about the automotive sector. We run an industrial ecosystem within a radius of 50 kilometers of the port that last year did measure an output of approximately 13 billion US of value. These are industrial goods. Our producer actually exported to the rest of the world thanks to the effectiveness and the efficiency of the logistics as our project is obviously, if I may say, the perfect conjunction of infrastructure-led development, economic development through logistics, and industrial development through infrastructure. That's how I would sum it up. And I hope I was concise enough.
Yes, you were. Thank you so much. Now let's get an actual private sector perspective. Let's bring in Mr. Labone, CEO, AGL Group. Now, the company could play a crucial role in developing regional corridors in Africa by focusing on infrastructure development, logistics, trade facilitation, and fostering economic integration. My question is, what do you think are the key roles for AGL in this case to contribute to the development of robust and integrated regional corridors in Africa, fostering economic growth and collaboration across borders? Also, I'd like you, if you can, please provide examples where AGL Group has done so in Africa.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank President Adesina and to congratulate the African Development Bank for the investment they have announced on the corridor on behalf of all the users of these corridors. These investments are welcome. To reply to your question, I should remind what are the key components of a corridor, and then explain how AGL is trying to match the needs of the corridor. First of all, you need a port. Then you need roads around the port to connect the ICDs around the city. Then you need roads, you need railroads, you need rivers. And at the end of the corridor, again, you need ICDs, inland depot, roads, trucks, and maybe barges and train. In AGL, but as Mehdi said, corridor is a lot about to align all the stakeholders of the corridor. First, you need people to coordinate. We have 23,000 employees fully dedicated to coordinate the operation on these corridors. Then you need data, because we speak about transporting goods, but nowadays data are as much important as good. And if you want to be efficient in a corridor, you should monitor the data. We operate trucks. We have 2,000 trucks. We operate 2 railroads. We are in 20 ports. We have 16 container terminals, 6 railroad terminals, 2 breakbulk terminals. We have more than 66 ICDs. We have 2 barging operations. So I would answer yes. We have the organization to match the expectation. Last year, we invested more than, with our partners in our JV, we invested more than 400 million euro on these corridors, in warehouses, in railroads, in ports. But we are a private company. We are committed to develop these railroads, but there are some component and key component of the roads, of the corridor, that are beyond our means, even though we are very long-term players. The roads, the railroads, and I fully agree with Peter. The future is about railroad. When you know that the cost of carbon, the carbon consumption for a truck is 10 times higher than the carbon consumption per rail. And as a corridor operator, believe me, it's much more easier to ship through train than to ship to trucks. So this is my point that I want to stress out. Yes, we are a good operator. I think we are even the best one. But we need a strong involvement, all these, of my friends around me. And all what I've heard is very positive for the future. And it's difficult for me to give an example of a corridor. I would say we are able to invest in every leg on the corridor when it makes sense financially, when there is a financial return, decent. So we have invested, for instance, I see Brazzaville corridor, we have invested $500 million in Pointe Noire port. Tomorrow we will invest in the port of Lobito, more than 100 million in the port, but we will also invest in Luao at the border. We will invest in Kolwezi in the yard in order to provide decent services to all our users. At the end, what I want to say, let's unlock Africa together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Labone, for that. A round of applause, please. Well, Ms. Dina, it's a pleasure to have you join us. We've heard from Burundi, we've heard examples from Angola, we've heard from East Africa, ECOWAS, the West African region, we've heard from development partners, we've heard from the private sector. I wonder, for you, just listening to the conversation so far, what is top of mind? I know that for PGII, you've also done some work with the Lobito Corridor. Just what is top of mind for you as you've listened to the perspective being shared, and perhaps some key elements that we should also, if you will, take into consideration as we move towards building more regional corridors?
Absolutely, and glad to be back up here and provide some gender balance.
Yes?
All right, yes. No, it's been wonderful to hear from the experience and advice from others, and I think everyone keyed in on some key things. One, we can't do this alone. It requires great partnership, which is why PGI starts with the word partnership. And on the behalf of the government, we are trying to do infrastructure differently, which also means taking more risks and sometimes operating in ways that may seem uncomfortable when we're trying to do new things faster to better meet the needs and close the infrastructure gap at an accelerated pace. So this means we all need support. We need pushing from our partners. We need like-minded companies that are going to come and also take risks and stretch and invest alongside so that we can achieve all of these gains together and in an accelerated way so that we don't leave Africa behind.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We've heard from our panelists today from across the African region, including, of course, the private sector and development partners, and it's quite encouraging to hear, just to hear the scale of the projects that are ongoing. But obviously, there's always room for improvement. We can and should have more projects, and hopefully we can unlock more financing to make that happen. Now, we're just going to pause here. We have about, I believe, about 7 minutes left. I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to participate and ask questions. So if you would like to just ask a question, let us know your name, the organization that you represent, and to whom your question is directed at. If we could please have a microphone. Yes, that's it. Can I take the gentleman on this? I saw a hand up here. Okay, in the front row, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Who's your question directed to, first of all?
My question is to the representative of European Union, because he talked about 12 corridors that they selected. Is the Central Corridor Transit Transport Facilitation Agency is among those 12 corridors that you selected? And if yes, what is the status of a partnership that you have with the Central Corridor? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So what we'll do is take 3 questions and then have them answered, and then we'll come back again. So can I have someone from the middle? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Manuel Mota, I'm Deputy CEO of Mota-Gil Group. We are owners of 50% of the Lobito Corridor concession, and we are also EPC contractors in an EPC plus finance model for the Kano Maradi, which connects the northern Nigerian to Niger. And we've been also involved in the Nakala corridor as a contractor and of the maintenance of the railway. And I'm going to speak more about the Lobito corridor and about the Kano Maradi. In those 2 projects, in the Lobito corridor, it's a concession. So far, we've signed the contract a year ago, and we started the operation 2 months ago. But in reality, the only entity that has put money into the project so far has been the private entities. We are discussing, the one that is most advanced is in fact DFC, but we are discussing with a lot of the banks and DFIs for the financial close. And giving the example also of Kano Maradi, where the project is not yet fully financed for different reasons, the Lobito corridor, and the specific there has to do with security. Okay, how can the government of Nigeria guarantee the security of the project long term? Okay, and the reality is, in the case of Kano Maradi, my question is, how can we fight, in this case, extremism and terrorism that exists, in fact, in some of the region without investing? So how can we help, and how can we still borrow money to the African governments to invest in critical areas, because it's this type of investment in corridors that is going to help? And in the Lobito corridor, is just an example, is in terms of project finance, how can we
I do beg your pardon, I do apologize to interrupt, but we're almost out of time. So would you like, what panelists in particular would you like to answer that question?
In the Lobito corridor, just to finalize it to 10 more seconds, how can the DFIs fast-track their processes to answer to the timings and demands of the governments imposed on private investors? So I would put the challenge to PGI.
To who?
To US government, please.
Okay, Mr. Nai. Okay, one last question, very quick. Question, no comments, please. Thank you. Gentlemen over there.
Thank you. I'm from Kenya, and my question is directed to the COMESA Secretary General. And based on the comments from, I don't remember the panelists, but the fact that railway transport pollutes less than road transport, yet we have an SGR project that only reached Nairobi and did not go ahead to complete the transport all the way to Kampala and Uganda. So what are the plans, based on the climate elements that you talked about, to complete this rail project from Nairobi further into Uganda and Tanzania, based on the corridors that you're talking about? And secondly, how does this huge investment for Africa, I think when I heard the Lobito corridor, it's about $600 billion US, sit with Africa's indebtedness? How will it play with social sector infrastructure, which has been neglected as we wait for the infrastructure development to take place and give us the dividends? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have exactly 3 minutes. Perfect timing to answer those 3 questions in 1 minute. Let's start with Mr. Seyo.
If I heard well, the question was about the central corridor. I wanted to say that
all of our governments, but certainly the U.S. government, when it does close, it will be the fastest transaction of this size that DFC has done, but it does take some time to move from the traditional speed into what we are looking to have as an accelerated pace for global infrastructure. So hold tight, it's coming soon. And then speaking to the large amount of infrastructure investments, PGI is specifically designed to be private sector led, where a smaller amount of concessional financing from the US government and other G7 partners can help facilitate a private sector investment such that it truly does minimize the debt that is taken on by the host governments, and it has potentially longer duration for operations that are private sector operated, so there's operations and maintenance built in for a project like the rail. And so that really is the intention behind PGI, to build infrastructure in a different way.
All right, thank you so much. Finally, Comesa, if you could do that in 10 seconds. Thank you.
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
Thank you very much. Well, this has to do with, COMESA has to do with the East African community, I must indicate from the beginning. Right. Well, SGRs are the future, definitely the future. But the problem with them is they are a bit challenging in terms of profitability. And of course, some of them incur huge debts, and I agree with the question. Of course, it's a very relevant question. Now, we need to invest in the future, albeit with the huge upscale investment in these projects and the challenge with profitability. But this is the right path to take for the future, SGRs. Now we're working very closely as a REC, along with other RECs, with the continental bodies like the African Union and NEPAD. We have something called PDABAP2, which is a list of projects to finance in terms of infrastructure, including railways, and of course working very closely with our development partners and our Pan-African financial institutions like the African Development Bank to support these projects. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, well, that's all the time we can take. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much of course, for those questions. And a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for that those very insightful conversations and perspective. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's session. Of course, we've been talking about regional corridors and their importance in integrating Africa. And a round of applause to our audience. You've been an amazing audience. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. That's all for now. Thank you.